Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel where I keep you updated with all the latest news and stories about Sheikh Hamdan and his family. If you've been following my channel, you already know I bring you the most authentic and heartfelt updates about the royal family. Today I have a lot to share, so sit back, relax, and let's get started. In my last video, we discussed Sheikh Hamdan waiting for his ex-wife, Hadia Zen's decision. She's currently in London, and Sheikh Hamdan has been eagerly waiting for her response to the conditions she set, which, if you've been following closely, you already know about. But that's not the only news. Sheikh Hamdan's current wife, Sheikha Thani, is also in London, leaving Dubai for some time. And now, even Sheikh Hamdan's girlfriend, Shamma al-Falasi, has distanced herself from Dubai, leaving him without knowledge of her whereabouts. So what's Sheikh Hamdan doing while his close ones are away? As I mentioned in my previous video, Sheikh Hamdan is spending his time in his palace with his two adorable children, Sheikha and Rashid. However, something unexpected happened recently. Both of his children came down with high fevers, starting with Sheikha, and later that same evening, Rashid fell ill too. This must have been extremely challenging for Sheikh Hamdan, as most of his nannies were away on holiday. Not only was he left without much support, but he was also swamped with political duties at the same time. Now, because it was a fever, Sheikh Hamdan didn't want to send Sheikha and Rashid to his father's residence, where other children are staying, as he didn't want to risk spreading the illness. In his desperation, Sheikh Hamdan reached out to Hadia, hoping she could help with the children, but unfortunately, Hadia didn't answer his call. Instead, she texted him, saying she would call after finalizing her decision on the conditions she had previously mentioned. If you watched my last video, you're already familiar with these conditions, but for those who missed it, Hadia has been setting terms for her return, which has left Sheikh Hamdan in a waiting game. Sheikh Hamdan, however, was in a tight spot. He tried calling her again and again, hoping she would come to Dubai to help, but still, no response. In the middle of the night, Sheikh Hamdan decided to call Shamma, despite not knowing her exact location. It was late, almost midnight, but to his relief, Shamma answered. She likely sensed that something urgent was happening. Sheikh Hamdan was overjoyed to hear her voice, and without wasting any time, he told her about the situation with his children. Shamma responded quickly. She didn't tell him where she was, but instead gave him an address and asked him to send a vehicle to pick her up. Of course, Sheikh Hamdan immediately arranged for her transport, and within an hour, Shamma arrived at his palace. It was actually the first time that Shamma had ever seen Sheikha and Rashid in person, and she didn't hesitate to help. Shamma took care of the children like an older sister, feeding them and even telling them bedtime stories until they finally fell asleep. It was heartwarming to see the bond form between them, especially when little Rashid started calling her sister. Shamma stayed at the palace for 3 days while Sheikha and Rashid recovered from their fever. Sheikh Hamdan had to attend the funeral of a cousin during this time, and Shamma made sure the children were well looked after. She lived in a separate room in the palace, always respecting Sheikh Hamdan's space and maintaining her own personal boundaries. Once the children were healthy again, Shamma expressed her desire to leave the palace. But before she could go, Sheikh Hamdan wanted to have a serious conversation with her. He told her something that likely came as a surprise. He said, "You don't need to leave the country to stay away from me. I promise you, any decision I make doesn't depend on you. Don't think about it so much. I'm trying to bring Hadia back for the sake of the children. You know the conditions she's set. You don't need to distance yourself until she agrees." Shamma, being the understanding and supportive person she is, replied, "Okay, I understand. I'll support you no matter what decision you make. I hope Hadia will come back soon." Sheikh Hamdan smiled, clearly relieved by Shamma's understanding. After their conversation, he personally dropped her off at her parents' house. But the story doesn't end there. Just a few days later, Shamma fell ill with a fever herself. Knowing this, Sheikh Hamdan immediately went to see her, bringing gifts to cheer her up. Among the presents was something very special, a single lollipop. But it wasn't from Sheikh Hamdan. It was from little Rashid, who had grown so fond of Shamma that he wanted to send her a gift. Shamma, despite feeling sick, couldn't help but smile when she saw the lollipop. She said, "Such a lovely boy," with a heart full of affection. Sheikh Hamdan was also clearly touched by the connection between his children and Shamma. Although she's still recovering from her fever, we all hope Shamma gets better soon and continues to be a wonderful presence in Sheikh Hamdan's life. So that's the latest update on Sheikh Hamdan and his family. A lot has been happening, and it's amazing to see the relationships within the family evolving, especially the growing bond between Shamma and the children. I hope you found this update interesting. If you want to stay up to date with more news about Sheikh Hamdan, his family, and everything happening in their world, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you'll never miss one of my videos. Thanks so much for watching. See you in the next video.